Welcome to Classroom Dynamics, a teacher podcast. I'm your host, Adam Todd. Get ready to tap into the power of motivation and innovative teaching strategies. Together, we'll ignite a love for learning in your students, fostering an inclusive environment where every child can thrive. Join us on this transformational adventure that empowers you to unlock your full potential as an educator. This is Classroom Dynamics, where inspiration meets innovation. Welcome to Classroom Dynamics, the podcast that brings you the latest trends in educational technology and teaching strategies in bite-sized form. Hi everybody, I'm your host Adam Todd, and in today's episode, we're going to explore Scratch, a user-friendly programming language that's revolutionizing the way students learn to code. Developed by the Lifelong Kindergarten Group at the MIT Media Lab, Scratch focuses on nurturing creativity, logical thinking, student-to-student collaboration, and problem-solving skills. It's a free and accessible tool that empowers learners to create interactive stories, games, and animations without feeling overwhelmed by complex coding jargon. This initiative to introduce coding education has sparked a global movement, inspiring countless young minds from as young as 8 years old to express their ideas through the language of code. One of the highlights of Scratch is its vibrant online community, where users of all ages from around the world share their creations and collaborate on projects. This fosters a culture of creativity and collaboration, and not just honing on technical skills, but also cultivating essential social skills as learners engage with diverse perspectives and ideas. Today we're going to look at how Scratch is transforming classrooms and encouraging students to become creators of technology for a 21st century world. Coming up next, we have a special guest joining us, Elaine Atherton, the head of programs at the Scratch Foundation. With her vast experience and passion for fostering creativity and learning, Elaine is all set to bring innovative changes to education through the platforms of Scratch. We'll be exploring her vision, ideas, and aspirations for empowering educators and learners. So get ready to be inspired as we discover the exciting possibilities that lie ahead with Scratch in education and technology. Calling all educators. Are you ready to inspire creativity and engagement in your students? Unlock their full potential with content creation. Imagine empowering them with cutting-edge tools like the Blue Sona microphone from Logitech, which ensures crystal clear audio quality for impactful projects. Logitech offers a full range of content creation solutions, from audio equipment and cameras to lighting and editing software. Plus, they have a suite of education solutions tailored for classrooms, elevating the learning experience for students and educators alike. Empower the next generation of creators by exploring the possibilities at logitech.com/education today. She's the head of programs at the Scratch Foundation, a popular block-based visual programming language, and her goal is to broaden opportunities for children and educators alike to engage students with their programs and products around the world. It's my pleasure to welcome Elaine Atherton to Classroom Dynamics.
Thank you for having me.
So my kids absolutely love Scratch. They love coding in general. And Scratch has been a game changer in introducing coding to young minds since 2007 when it first launched. But before we get into your role with Scratch, for those teachers who may not know what Scratch is, or they don't know what it does or what the goal is, how would you describe the program to them?
So we love to tell that Scratch is a global research-based visual programming experience. But at its core, it's a creative learning tool, creative coding tool. It is a platform that is available offline and offline, and it brings global access for creative coding through partnerships, collaboration to children all around the world. We have a priority, especially with engaging children from communities that usually are underserved, that do not have an opportunity to have a lot of coding experience, especially because of cost, especially because of needed resources that they don't have access to. Scratch, and for anyone that doesn't know, actually was created first in MIT's Lifelong Kindergarten Group in 2007. So this year we turned 16. No driver's license or scratch cat. But the initial focus was really to create new ways for creative expression and creative learning to occur, especially in a digital platform. Kids are able to take creative learning ideas and they're able to express themselves in ways that they might not be able to express themselves in a hands-on way through this digital platform. They can share their projects with other peers around the world. They can give feedback to each other. They can remix other people's projects. So they're not always starting from a blank canvas. And they really are able to hone in on developing their thinking processes, their identities, and their voice while they're in this space.
I'm glad you said that because I don't think I could have said it any better. That was great. You know, my kids love it, and my daughter's actually turning 16, so just as old as Scratch is right
Ah,
now. So, but my kids absolutely, they love to tinker with it. They love to play with it, kind of like what you were just mentioning. They literally can get drawn into it for hours on end, creating, recreating, designing, building. But what about you? You know, what drew you to Scratch? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
yeah, so it's so funny that you just even mentioned the word tinker. Scratch, the platform itself, was designed for tinkerability. Is not happenstance that your daughter just organically has that experience. The stage was set for her to have that experience. And so for me, I first started working with Scratch, using Scratch as an instructional coach. I was a former high school teacher, and then I moved to instructional coaching and worked with career and technical education teachers. I've worked with teachers from over 40 different counties in the South. So I got around a lot all over the place. But especially starting, believe it or not, with middle school teachers and high school teachers that were coming into coding from industry. So a lot of them had been engineers in different ways, and they did not have necessarily the pedagogical knowledge to teach those courses always. And they wanted, it was a very, very short runway for their learning to occur, of how to engage their kids. And so when I first became familiar with Scratch, that was something we leaned heavily into, because the floor, we always say low floor, wide walls, high ceiling. The floor was low for educators themselves to actually start to tinker and engage with Scratch. It didn't require them to kind of like finish the book, so to speak, before they started teaching it to kids. They were learning alongside them, doing projects with them. So that was something that started for me, I believe, roughly 6 years ago or so, and eventually moved into working more so at the university level with after school and summer programs. And just through colleagues, I had the opportunity to learn more about Scratch Foundation. Scratch Foundation, a lot of people don't know, Scratch is run by an actual foundation of people that we're generously supported by donations. We are a standalone and no longer inside of the media lab. And we have engineers, we have curriculum, creative learning teams, kind of full shop. And being able to kind of take what I learned from being a classroom teacher, instructional coach, and also what I learned just engaging educators that were nervous and new to integrating new things into their classroom, I've been able to put into my work here, and it always keeps it exciting. And I'm constantly just grateful to be in this experience at the foundation.
You kind of touched upon the widespread popularity of it, and coding has become that. It's just almost like a flood of just engagement and just wonder for the kids. In terms of inclusion and how that goes, how does Scratch ensure that the platform is accessible and culturally relevant to children from diverse backgrounds and different regions of the world?
It has to be intentional. One of the things we do is we have a really significant focus on localization. And localization for us is not just translation. Scratch editor is actually translated into more than 70 languages. We're constantly looking at where is there a need for us to have more languages added. This next month, I'll say next month safely, we are actually going to launch Hindi and Nepali as two languages we have translated the editor into. So that's a big difference. We recognize a lot of kids, a lot of countries emphasize learning a more dominant language such as English or majority language. But we know kids, especially younger kids, really benefit from seeing things in their home language. So we want to make sure we're providing that resource. We've also approached localization in the sense of having additional learning resources like our tutorials and guides translated, Scratch Day guides for educators. So it's beyond just being in the editor. There's tangible resources that carry it beyond just the editor experience or supplement it. One of the things we also do is we have programs, and we design a lot of everything we do is centered on the child. But we also know we reach the child through educators. Educators are part of the heartbeat of Scratch. And we have two programs, Scratch Educator Meetups. Scratch Educator Meetups is an opportunity for educators to get together to explore creative and playful learning experiences, share materials in how they've seen different ways to engage their kids in the Scratch environment. They can join a local meetup. It's actually local. Some of them are remote, but having that localized context definitely helps with the cultural relevancy. And then and they're free. It's a free program. We also have the Scratch Education Collaborative. That was our first program we launched in 2021. It's a 2-year cohort program, and we're starting our third cohort now. Educators from over 20 countries are in it. This year alone, the educators in organizations we work with affect over 400,000 kids. And what they're able to do is bring their experience into even how we think of equitable experiences of how to apply and design creative learning and creative coding experiences. I'm in North Carolina. Our team is largely US based. And so we acknowledge our privilege, and we also acknowledge our access to resources and what we don't know. So when we're able to bring these cohorts together, we emphasize them collaborating with each other and building on each other's strengths. So they're able to scale the work and draw deeper connections, and also realize we're a lot more similar than different at the end of the day.
It's so true. The multi-layered approach that I think Scratch has. I appreciate that as an educator, as a teacher. I don't know, how other teachers might be using it. I'm sure it's about the same. But even those teachers that have never even heard of Scratch, it's so nice to know that there is so much there for support. And I think that's, half the battle right there for teachers, at least.
Absolutely. And we've been excited to see the response for the Scratch Education Collaborative, or the SEC. We were started with initial funding from Google. We were supposed to have 3 organizations, and then we thought maybe we'll extend it to 10. We ended up with 40 after we had 200 applications. Our second cohort has 85 organizations that have really leaned in to join. So the response, once we were able to start to prioritize a lot of our connections with educators and nonprofit organizations that support educators and kids, specifically from historically underrepresented communities. When you don't normally see faces like theirs in a lot of engineering, programming, or coding conversations. Girls, people from Indigenous, Latinx, Black communities, high poverty areas. And so I think having our mission of Scratch, of wanting to make sure we're providing a resource, a platform that is free and accessible to young people and engaging them around the world, but also making sure that we are acknowledging the educators that are truly giants in their world, and making sure that they are just as knowledgeable and feel just as included in the Scratch community as well, is really important.
I'll tell you this much: the girls in my class are never bored. I don't ever, in terms of my whole unit of coding, I've never heard those words, "I'm bored," which is
I love
really
that.
great.
Yes. And
But
I think it's also because when you think of the idea that's in alignment with our mission, the fact that it's a tool to support opportunities for imagining, creating, sharing, and learning at the same time, but it's all of those things together. How can you be bored if you are encouraged to share, which means you're encouraged to talk, to think together? That to me is what gets me really excited when I see kids doing that.
that's a great transition to my next question, because when I even introduce using Scratch in the classroom, the very first thing I tell them is that I'm out.
Yeah.
Don't come to me. Don't ask me for help. I'm only here if your computer is smoking, it's not working, it's crashing, it's frozen. I'm not involved. I want to have you guys involved. And I tell them that, especially with the debugging process, you're not to come to me. And I make that very straightforward. That is the rule. Do not come to me. You need to go to a classmate, form a partnership, even form a small group, or
Mhm.
if that's the case, get a bigger group, if all the heads in that group can't figure it out. But I like that tinkering and that forced communication and that forced collaboration that they don't necessarily always get. I think for me, I feel that it's a huge tool to have, for later on in life, for anything. You can't figure it out. What are you going to do? You can't always go to the teacher. You can't always go to mom or dad at home. What are you going to do? What is your next step? So the question that I have with that is that, do you think sometimes teachers, I don't feel this way, but I think sometimes some teachers do feel uncomfortable giving up those reins and saying, hey, no, I'm not going to be involved. I'm not going to give you a hint. I'm not going to help you out. I need you to struggle for a little while to see if you could figure it out.
Absolutely. Um, but I want to challenge the idea of giving up, because I'll tell you, you actually have not been as hands off, Adam, as you think. You actually designed the experience for students to have that open canvas, that stage for them to actually work together, engage in making projects they're passionate about, that feel like it's playful because they're constantly iterating together and they're with their peers. So it wasn't just kind of a, all right, I'm gonna go to the teacher's lounge kind of thing.
Right.
You designed that. So one of the things we talk about on my team is, how are we more explicit to empower educators to see themselves first as designers? We talk a lot about facilitating with a playful mindset, but you actually have to design for that to be successful. And what does that look like? Sometimes that does look like scaffolding your class to know to ask two classmates before they ask you a question. Sometimes it does mean that you are thoughtfully pairing your students together, or that you're making space for them to actually use Scratch or to do an unplugged creative learning activity more than just once every 3 weeks. So it actually, if I feel it's more empowering to start with our educators being thought of as designers first, because then I think the idea that I'm giving up on my power and I can't control this, you've actually designed it to exist in, even if it's the productive chaos you see, you actually designed that to happen that way.
Yeah, and I love actually walking around and seeing their minds going and the gears going in their head and trying to figure it out. I like actually jumping in sometimes and making a guess. Well, what
Yeah.
if you tried this? Would that work? Let's do a guess and check. Let's try it and see if that works. They absolutely love when I jump into their projects like that.
hmm it's so funny. We had a really great opportunity to visit through our partnership with Lego Tech and Play, a school in Rwanda last year, and to see how they did stations at this primary school. It went up to sixth grade. These were, I believe, fifth grade students. They were exploring chemical energy exchanges in a creative learning way. And so some of them were tinkering with building kind of like a robot with repurposed materials. Others were actually kind of drawing out a storyboard with each other. And then one group of students, they were given matches or like something to start a fire. They literally just helped, they went off to the side, huddled down, and lit a fire and recorded the observations of the fire. And I said, this would never happen in North Carolina. But one of the things was, it was interesting to see the adults, both those of us that were visitors as well as the teacher, how they decided to lean in, and when they just wanted to see, even in an unplugged environment, how kids debugged, so to speak, getting themselves out of trouble. Of course, if the fire would have spread, we would have stepped in. But even when the robot, the car they were making, didn't move, they just left it alone. They watched, they observed. They said, I'm here if you need me. But it was really interesting to even see some of them wanted to jump in so much more, and they just held back and wanted to see how the kids really relied on working with their peers and collaborating to not just get through the task at hand, but build deeper connections and meaning. Because now I know I can go to my partner, or this person knows this information, or I know I can solve this problem if I persevere a little bit.
It's interesting, the same process on different continents, different levels, different ideas, different backgrounds, but basically the bottom line, same process.
Absolutely.
That's great. So Scratch offers a variety of projects, obviously, for kids to explore and create. We talked about that a little bit in terms of the visual programming aspect of it. For a teacher who wants to get started with Scratch, has no idea where to start, doesn't know what to do, how to begin, what even block coding means. What are some of the different types of projects students can try out on their own, or even the teacher try out just to kind of tinker and put themselves in the shoes of the kids? That's almost self-directed in a plug and play kind of fashion.
So one of the great things, great resources we have are our Scratch coding cards. And it's one of those things, it doesn't matter how many more evolved resources I see, the Scratch coding cards will forever kind of be like the number one that we see a lot of educators look at. And so what it is, it's a series of very basic projects that engage in initial exploration of concepts such as sequences, loops, using event blocks, different things like that. And so it'll say if you want to make your name, animate your name, as a really popular project, and it will say, this is how you can add your sprites to spell out your name, Elaine. Well, what if you want your L to spin around, or you want your N to kind of shine in a different color? And it gives you some suggestions for those. And those are really easy, I think, for educators to start with. We have starter projects that they can remix and build on. I also find that our coding cards and starter projects are not just helpful for beginner educators and kids, but also for families. We've supported the development of family creative coding nights, and family creative coding night. First, the guide initially developed by a wonderful mind, Rika Rose Roque, and we've been able to develop a remote version in the pandemic, but it engages caretakers, siblings in a coding experience with their kids, so they're able to see how their Scratcher, how their learner is actually making projects. You actually find that, the kids take it to it so easily that once you actually empower them to come back and teach their caregivers, their teachers, that actually is even so much more of a fulfilling experience that I think doesn't give the impression of giving up control as an educator necessarily, but it actually is showing the success. That's what you want. To me, if your learner can come back and explain to you what they learned on their own to some degree that surpassed what you showed them, that is the A+ for the teacher, to me, more so than showing they don't know something.
No, I've seen that happen before. It's funny. There was a time, it was about a year or two ago. We had a superintendent visit, and I was sitting. We have all these little couches and little poof areas, I guess you can call, on a rug. And I was sitting on one, my back was to the door. So I didn't even know that the principal and the assistant principal had come in, and the kids were working in Scratch. And I was just basically sitting, something was going on with the computer. I don't know how long they were standing behind me, but the kids were so engaged and doing what you just said, just with their peers, teaching each other and talking and working so beautifully. When I turned around, I was like, oh my goodness, hi, how are you? And we started chatting, and her reaction was like, this is the epitome of like what a 21st century classroom should look like. The way it's working. She said to me, I didn't even know that you didn't even know that I was standing there. And yeah. I've been here for a few minutes, and it has been like this the whole time. And she was very impressed with that. And I joked with her. I said, we could always go get a coffee. We'll come back in 10 minutes. They won't even know we left. That's how engaged they are. And she couldn't agree more. So it's that kind of system that's almost, like you said, designed, purposely designed into it, but it kind of happens naturally too at the same time, that helps the program just chug along so beautifully.
Absolutely. And like I said, I think having some of those initial resources, the fact that when you go on to the Scratch online platform, you're able to see our front page that has curated projects that have been selected. You can look at them. We have a lot of some kids just log in just to look at other projects and just get inspired and just be able to give feedback and comment on other things. And so to me, that is just as special. It is specifically not just designed for tinkerability, but this idea of a low floor. Really, and the low floor is differentiated. A low floor for a classroom in New York City that may have a lot of investment in its resources, just even as far as policy as a district, a very large district, in welcoming technology and technology integration. You have some countries where they are, even states, they're stripping away technology integration. There is one technology teacher for a cluster of 7 elementary schools, and they see them once a month if they're lucky. And so to be able to say that the low floor for that school that doesn't have a lot of resources and access, and the school that actually has a little bit more, it's going to look different, but it still is a floor low enough for someone to essentially walk into the experience and feel successful. It's not like when you're learning to code a more advanced, learn a lot more advanced coding program, you see the red squiggly lines. Oh, it's all wrong. It's all wrong. There's no bah or anything like that for Scratch. It really is either a true user error or it is a bug and you have to fix it. You have to work through it. And it is a supportive environment that still looks fun and is playful as you're trying to kind of do that trial and error while until you're able to feel more confident.
That's amazing that some districts are actually pulling away when you have a lot of states and cities that are saying, hey, you have to take X amount of computer science classes in order to graduate high school now. That boggles my mind.
It's a challenge. I think it's still a challenge to find a lot of technology teachers as well. So some of the, I think, changes are more so predicated on need, not necessarily of like fear of technology, but they really just don't have the resources, unfortunately. And even though Scratch is a free resource, you could use Scratch Junior on tablets, you can use Scratch on a Chromebook, in different computing devices. Everyone isn't a one-to-one district, and sometimes that is a really big challenge.
What are some of the most effective and creative ways you've seen educators weave Scratch into their curriculum? And what, if you had to pick like an age group to start, what do you think is the best age group for Scratch that benefits them the most in terms of learning a computer programming language?
So Scratch is designed really for the sweet spot of age groups. We say from 8 to 16, but some people say from pre-K and beyond, so to speak. I think it depends on a few things. One is really leaning back on that positionality of Scratch being a tool for creativity. We tend to see that when students start in using Scratch, they'll transition from Scratch Junior, that is from pre-K, ideally to second grade, starting with Scratch integration around third grade, and really notice that a lot of students are pretty heavy in how they use Scratch up until earlier middle school grades. What then is a need for more creativity, and also we're working to provide more resources for educators, is how do you support those older students to use Scratch? So we've done a few different things. We have, even for our back to school resources that are coming out in mid-September, we have grade banded them to start to think about this is what it might look like in a middle school or in a high school. We've done a project now for 2 years with AT&T and developed materials for their Achievery platform. It's a free online platform that has so many different Scratch guides and tutorials where we get into things such as Cartesian coordinates and using variables in different ways that definitely are more suited for your older students. But we even go into how do you design a collage using Scratch? How do you make new sounds? And I think that allows it to be scaffolded up or down depending on your age group, broken into different ways in order to kind of still engage those students. But I go back to what I first said about also Scratch being a tool for creativity, especially when, although, we know elementary age is kind of the most ideal, finds the most usage out of it as far as being interested in not having as many kind of more advanced coding programs kind of shared with them at that moment. So they really lean into Scratch as an introduction. But for our older kids, knowing that beyond integrating hardware like a microbit or a Raspberry Pi or a Makey, you can re-engage them in how do you share your ideas and express yourself creatively using Scratch. I gave the example recently of my mom. She's 73. She still does adult coloring books. You don't tell someone, once you learn to color in the lines, it's time for Photoshop. You carry that skill, that love for coloring all the way through. It's creative expression. So I think we need to also continue to amplify for our older kids. When I was a high school teacher, my kids would do storyboards. They would be able to draw cartoons in order to explain their thoughts and things of that nature. That can be done in Scratch. As social studies teacher, some of my favorite projects in Scratch are actually when kids talk about their local areas or their countries, and they show all the different pictures. They use the digital backpack to have insert culturally relevant assets into their projects. And it is something you could not naturally do or showcase in a hands-on project. It truly is a transformation of the idea because they're doing it on a digital platform. And I think if we can continue to elevate and amplify what that looks like for our older kids, it won't be as much of an immediate thought of scratches primarily for younger, third grade and a little bit up, but really seeing it truly from that 8 to 16 and beyond.
I think you kind of answered the question I was going to ask you next in a way, but I'll kind of twist it around a little bit. So I love the idea of kind of expanding and focusing on some of those older kids. I think that is important because they're, when they're in that second grade, third grade, fourth grade section of their life, I think the more that they use it, I don't want to say that they feel like the walls have kind of like just come up to a point where they're not going to expand anymore. I like the fact that there are ideas that you can break through those walls and take it a many steps further, not just a step or two, but many steps. But what about the latest trends in technology then, with coding, education, like artificial intelligence, for example? Are those kind of things in the works? Is there something you can share with us that's coming down the pike that maybe you can kind of give us a little taste of now?
Yeah, so we recently launched our high color contrast blocks. And I'm so excited about that because when you've been in situations and you recognize the need, and now we have it, it's a new function in our platform, especially supports those that have low vision. And we're constantly working to try to make the site more accessible. When you think of the massive audience Scratch has, we have a big responsibility. And so, us being able to roll out those blocks was really, really important for us. We're also trying to really make sure we're adding more languages, even certain dialects, as in, if I'm not mistaken, it is important because there is Spanish that is spoken in Spain is different than Spanish that is spoken in Mexico. And so being able to have that kind of nuance in our editor in translation is really important to us. We're also working on still developing more material with the Achievery, but especially AI, we know is a very, very hot topic. We see it all the time. I'm asked about it all the time. What is Scratch's stance? What are we doing? For those that aren't familiar with Scratch Lab, Eric Rosenbaum is our director of Scratch Lab, and he has just been phenomenal about how he thinks about thoughtfully integrating AI into Scratch. What does that look like? How do we do it in a thoughtful and safe way? He recently just published a blog inside Scratch Lab and with AI image generation. He talks more so about that. And what you're able to see is first he models kind of how to what does that look like in Scratch Lab, but talks about the pitfalls, the fact that there are different reasons we're not just immediately saying AI and Scratch, this is what we're leaning into. We have a really big responsibility when it comes to digital privacy for kids. We really work hard. We have moderation in our online community. We have community guidelines. We have a really, really robust set of standards that we adhere to try our best to provide a safe environment for kids. And so when we think about how to thoughtfully integrate AI that aligns to the creative learning ethos, as well as who we are as an organization, we have to think about things such as digital download, the fact that we have some kids using the offline version. So some of the features we would want to embed are going to now make it impossible for a kid to download that's using the offline version. So now you expand an inequity already that exists. So we're always constantly trying to think about what is that tension that we can ease between innovation, creativity, but also trying to make sure that we're providing a free platform for all of our scratchers around the world where it doesn't feel like a less than experience for some.
And as an educator on both ends of this chat here, I think you're going to pretty much agree with me. I think thinking ahead and then the steps that are ahead of that, and then thinking of three more steps past that
Yes.
is probably the biggest challenge for a teacher.
Yes.
Even when they're speaking during a lesson, what's gonna, what could happen? What if this kid says this? Where am I gonna go with it? And you're always thinking and thinking ahead. And I think that's great that Scratch has those layers embedded in it.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things I really like that Eric even talks about in that blog and talks about internally with us is how do we think of AI and how we integrate it and think of it with Scratch as it aligns to expressiveness as well as convenience, looking at the possibilities, um, not necessarily running away from we don't want to do this. We don't want it to be a part of the process. AI, especially in regards to image generation, it doesn't replace the creative process. We actually need to think about how to make it part of the creative process. It's going to happen. It's there. AI has been around for actually more than probably 15 years. People just act like it came out last year. And so we need to really learn, especially in different educational contexts, how do we gain awareness? How do we work with it? How do we integrate it thoughtfully? How do we recognize our biases when it comes to what we're consuming and what we're actually redistributing? That's going to be really important, I think, for educators as well, but also recognizing that it could be a tool to extend the creative process and especially can lead to even more students feeling that they're able to design things they're passionate about, that they want to share with their peers to expand or generate in different projects they never thought they could. I really think that it can be seen as a very thoughtfully used tool rather than a barrier to navigate around.
This has been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate your time, but we have 2 more minutes left.
Yes.
And I want to play a game with you called Input Output, where I'm going to say something. I just want you to give me the first thing that comes to your mind. No wrong answers here. Okay, you ready?
Yep.
Okay, here we go. Favorite app or website that's at the top of your bookmarks bar on your computer that you just can't live without?
I would say it is actually LinkedIn.
Ooh, that's a good one. Favorite starter project on the Scratch website?
Animate a name.
And you know what? My kids, I think, like that one too. So I think they would agree with you. Best piece of advice that anyone ever gave you?
It was to mind your business.
Favorite edtech conference that you always look forward to attend no matter what?
ISTE. I really enjoy ISTE.
Why ISTE of all of them?
I think what I like about ISTE is it is one of the few conferences a lot of people prioritize, even coming from distant areas. So I'm able to see people I've known virtually for 7 years in person for the first time, but also the content. They are really committed to having the content be differentiated, but have a common thread that you feel like you're going to the same conference, but also a wildly different conference and how it's informative and transformational every year.
I've done ISTE a couple of times. I've presented there a couple of times, and I feel like I'm a kid in a candy store. It's like you don't know where to go first. It's so you love everything. But I think I would agree with you with ISTE on that. What's the coolest corner of the world that you've heard Scratch is being used in?
Coolest corner of the world. That's a fantastic question. We have learned Tunisia in Northern Africa just hosted we have an organization there, Autisme in the SEC. They just hosted their first Scratch Day. They had, I believe, over 400 participants. They've never had a Scratch Day. It is not a very populated area in Northern Africa. Very challenging to mail materials there too, but it's been so incredible to see how they've embraced their population. That particular organization especially embraces families and kids that have neurodiverse needs, including autism. And so to be able to see them engaging with Scratch and also wanting to engage with other countries to bring them into their work they're doing there has been fantastic.
How amazing is that to connect them with the rest of the world, literally the rest
Yes.
of the world, right? I mean, when we were kids, the rest of the world was, you had to get on a plane. That was the rest of the world. That's the only way to see it. Now it's like, wow, instant almost, right?
Unless you had an encyclopedia, maybe a nerd fact, but like my
Right.
favorite thing to do as a 4-year-old and 5-year-old was look at pictures in the encyclopedia. That actually is what inspired me to learn to read, because I wanted to know the words.
Mm,
So that was how we got around the world back then anyway.
right. 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 So teachers all know that it's always about the students, but what's your favorite conversation with a student that you're always going to remember no matter what?
I love hearing from a student. Most recently, I can say, working with a student, visiting a student classroom in Brazil, and hearing them talk about how they developed a newsletter to tell their peers about the projects they were making really brought me back to experiences even in my teaching internship days, where you would have almost show and tell for high school students, and they would tell about something they made to their peers and be able to model what they made. And so two things I took away from that is the pride that they had in sharing about their work, and how supportive their peers were when they tripped up or explained something a little incorrectly. That is where I like to stand back and just let them have it and let them take a go at it. And it just is one of my favorite things to hear them talk about what they've done and hear them talk with each other.
That's great. Finally, if you could go back in time, go back to your 4-year-old nerd self if you want, go back in time and give yourself one piece of technology from today, what would it be?
I would give myself, I'm trying to think of the technology I had at that moment. Believe it or not, I would probably give myself Lego blocks. And I know that sounds weird to think of them as technology. That's a controversial thing, how you think of technology. But I think when I think of Lego blocks and I think of the things that you can develop that are actually non-digital, but still innovative, that actually can build on an idea that was not the same before, I would definitely say Lego blocks. Also, I would, if I had to kind of give a duplicative answer or another answer, I would definitely give myself a phone. And not to talk to people, but really just to look up more information in a convenient way. So encyclopedia can be accessed even quicker on the internet with Google. So I would probably give myself a phone to search for things real quick. I
That's
was very
so true.
curious.
That's so true. I think most people might say phone just for that
Yeah.
purpose, right? Just to have that information at their fingertips.
Yes.
Listen, thank you very much. This has been fantastic. Great information. Like I said, I love using Scratch. My kids love using Scratch. And I think teachers who are listening to this, who may not have ever either A, heard of Scratch, or B, thought that they could use it in other ways other than just, building a game or just having some tinkering fun. I think this has expanded their knowledge on it.
I'm really excited. Thank you so much for even having me. I'm so excited that you have this opportunity, and I've been able to look at a few of your other videos. So I really hope we're able to talk again at some point and even figure out some different ways for you to engage in things that we have going on.
I would love that, and I'm all for it. Whenever you want, just contact me. We're in. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time, and hopefully we'll get to have you back on here in the near future.
All right. Take care.
Well, I'd like to thank Elaine Atherton, Head of Programs at the Scratch Foundation, for joining me today to share her expertise, her experiences, and passion for empowering students through coding and creativity with Scratch. Elaine's valuable insights have, without a doubt, inspired educators worldwide to foster an engaging and dynamic learning environment for their students, and I appreciate the time and dedication she's made to create a positive impact on the future generation of innovators. To our listeners, stay tuned for more exciting conversations, and remember, the key to unlocking the full potential of our classrooms lies in embracing the spirit of exploration and collaboration. And that brings us to the end of this episode of Classroom Dynamics, where knowledge and inspiration meets innovation. I hope you've enjoyed today's discussion and found it both to be insightful and uplifting. And as always, my goal is to provide you with practical strategies, engaging stories, and powerful insights that can fuel your motivation as an educator. I believe that when knowledge and inspiration do come together, incredible things can happen in your classroom. And for all of you who may feel that it's too late to strengthen your craft, I challenge you to make it your mission to do so. You've worked hard to get to where you are today, and it's never too late to infuse new life into your work. So why not make today that day to do so? But before we go, I want to take a moment to thank you, our amazing listeners. Your dedication to creating a dynamic learning environment for yourself and your students is truly inspiring on its own. I'm Adam Todd, and you've been listening to Classroom Dynamics, a teacher podcast. You can follow Classroom Dynamics on Twitter at Class Dynamics. If you haven't already, I encourage you to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. We'll be back soon with more captivating conversations, inspiring stories, and strategies that you can implement immediately into your everyday routines. Until then, keep igniting that spark in your classroom and never stop believing in the incredible impact you have as an educator. You're more powerful and inspirational than you think. Are you a dedicated educator searching for fresh and engaging resources to inspire your students? Look no further than Highly Motivated on Teachers Pay Teachers. Discover a treasure trove of easy-to-use lesson plans, vibrant visuals, and interactive activities designed to captivate young minds and ignite their love for learning. Unlock the potential within your classroom with Highly Motivated, from differentiated lap books to test prep passages on a multitude of topics. Our wide range of materials cater to most elementary and middle school grade levels. Join the community of passionate teachers who have already transformed their classrooms. Visit Highly Motivated on Teachers Pay Teachers and get ready to inspire, motivate, and empower your students like never before. Highly Motivated on Teachers Pay Teachers, where knowledge meets inspiration.